It is my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce to you a gentleman who I'm learning more and more about as I look at who in the legislature is really focused on addressing and becoming the champions for our cleaner environment. Senator Ricardo Lara is with us today, and I want to do him the justice he deserves, so just give me 1 second to tee up. There we go. We've become so dependent on our devices that we no longer walk around with sheets of paper. Raised in East Los Angeles, Senator Ricardo Lara represents Southeast Los Angeles County, Long Beach, and some of the nation's busiest and most polluted transportation corridors. Senator Lara is one of California's most effective environmental champions. Let's give him a round of applause for that. Not many people can say that they become environmentally astute, that less become an environmental champion. He has authored Senate Bill 605 in 2014 and the Super Pollutant Reduction Act, Senate Bill 1383 in 2016, to slash emissions of black carbon, methane, and fluorinated gases. Senator Lara also has authored Senate Bill 1204 in 2014, which created the Clean Truck, Bus, and Off-Road Vehicle and Equipment Technology Program. See, for a lot of folks, that goes right by you, but you're enjoying the benefits of those carbon reduction efforts, of those methane gas reductions. So recognize that it didn't happen just on a whim. It happened because of strategic, committed relationships that Senator Lara was able to bring to bear on this legislation. In 2017, this year, he has successfully advocated for the single largest investment in clean air in California's history, nearly $1 billion to reduce diesel exhaust and $140 million to reduce super pollutants. Senator Lara is an ex-official member of the Air Resources Board and was nominated for the 2017 Climate and Clean Air Awards along with Governor Brown and the ARB for his work on short-lived climate pollutants. Move LA is proud and honored to be able to begin our program discussions this morning with a presentation from our friend, Senator Ricardo Lara. Governor's calling you, Senator.
Yeah, answer that. Good morning. It's great to be here. I just sent a text to my mom and told her, believe it or not, I'm at church and it's early in the morning. So thank you all for making me a better son, and the fact that I haven't disintegrated yet is testimony that God is good, so I'm good. Just don't send me to confession, please. That'll be very interesting. It's great to be here. It's great to see my fellow seatmate, the amazing Senator Fran Pavley. Let's give her a round of applause for her tremendous work. She was in charge of taking care of me in the Senate, and I think she, full-time job, Fran, I know. She tried to keep me in line. She was successful once in a while. I mean, I give in. But it's great to be here, and congratulations on Measure M. What a tremendous accomplishment for our county, and thanks to your support and your leadership. Measure M was a tremendous accomplishment that will help LA County address some of the world's most important issues when it comes to traffic congestion. Your hard work is tangibly changing the face of mobility in our region, and I'm excited to watch that transformation of my community's transportation system. We know we're going to get more options, we're going to get more improvements, more connectivity, and that is what are the foundations of a successful transportation corridor. I was just in London and in Helsinki, two cities that are taking on traffic congestion. And traffic congestion is one of the biggest problems, as we know, not only in the city of LA, city of San Francisco, up and down the Central Valley, and in the Inland Empire. Congestion is literally taking money out of people's pockets And we need solutions not only to save them money, but to save our environment as well. And so solutions that are currently being undertaken in Europe might necessarily work here in Los Angeles, but I love the theme of this year's conference, What's Next, LA County. And so I came up with 3 ideas that I think we can work on as we move forward. We need innovative ideas, and we need committed community leaders and bringing everyone at the table to make it happen. So these 3 areas that I think we can all work together on is, one, is really rebuilding our transit ridership. That is a problem not just here in LA, but nationally. I am pleased that the Board of Supervisors voted for a pilot program to give transit passes to college students as part of the registration. I think that would make a tremendous difference. We need to drastically jumpstart student ridership to improve not only educational and mobility outcomes for the leaders of tomorrow. We also need to expand other strategies such as bike sharing, car sharing, van pooling, and other innovative measures. You know, in Helsinki, they actually have an app for the residents where everything's integrated. It's not just, you don't go to a separate link for a taxi. You don't go for a separate link for Uber, link for your metro, for the underground, for buses. It's all integrated in one, and you pay one fee for all those services. And so you get real time, you know when the bus is coming, you know what time the metro is gonna, pass through the station nearest you, and all with real life times. It's been able to cut real traffic congestion by 15% in the inner city alone. And so technology plays a pivotal role in how we move around LA County, and it is going to play a pivotal role how we move around the world as well. So many of these equitable mobility strategies have already been successfully even piloted here in Los Angeles, as we know, and the next step is really scaling them up. The second issue that I think is important for us is the need for more affordable housing and anti-displacement strategies, especially around mass transit corridors. Otherwise, people are just going to move further away from jobs and spending more time in their cars, as we already know. The third one that I want to talk to you about is, we really need to admit that congestion and pollution are a regional problem as well. And if we are serious about the development of emission reductions and affordable housing, we need a regional strategy around transit and goods movement. That sounds like a big job, and it is, but that is what California does best. We don't shy away from these big problems that we have. It is our obligation to lead. It is our obligation now more than ever to demonstrate to the rest of the country that through innovation, technology, and the right incentives, and a very supportive legislature, we can actually get major things done, like we've done this year alone in this legislature by passing not only an infrastructure bond, by passing a housing bond, and now a park bond to continue to get us to a place where we live in a much more equitable society where everybody gets to benefit from living in LA County. And that is what Move LA does best, bringing us together to coalesce and work on strategies of how to address these issues. You have a partner in the California legislature to solve these problems and bring groups together, like I said earlier. We know that the need to leave diesel behind and accelerate deployment of clean technologies is essential, and it is our next fight that we are going to undertake in the legislature. This is why we authored SB 1204 along with Senator Fran Pavley in 2014. The Clean Bus and Truck program now becomes the most critical program in the legislature, with an infusion of over close to $1 billion in resources to allow for the right formula of incentives and regulation to ensure that we continue to revolutionize our public transportation system. And that has borne tremendous fruit for our state. We have seen 2 clean bus manufacturing companies move their headquarters from North Carolina into California and their manufacturing plants in the Inland Empire. This is real change and real results when it comes to job creation for Californians. So as we move forward, we have to continue to push and revolutionize how we continue to invest in these technologies. And for me, this is very near and dear to my heart. I grew up in East Los Angeles, in Commerce, California. For me, there was no parks for me and my family. We played on the street, like many of you did. We played in parking lots of the big companies right in Vernon, but with BNSF Rail Yard right next door as our backyard. And so these are real folks that are living this life every day. And the policies that we push through Move LA and through the legislature try to make it more equitable for everyone. And unfortunately, you know, I always have this discussion with my parents. I go, why did you move so close to the damn 710 freeway? And they're like, it was convenient. We had no idea. And now understanding that people don't have the luxury to move anymore. So we now have to bring these policies into our communities to affect that positive change. And that is exactly what we're doing with Measure M. That is exactly what the goals are of Move LA. This is why I'm so supportive of this amazing organization. And as we move forward, now more than ever, given what is happening in Washington, D.C., we have to double down our efforts. We have to be unapologetic about what we are doing and how we are impact the quality of life for so many Californians, regardless of what zip code you live in. And so as we move forward, know that we in the legislature are going to continue to partner with you. We want to be very, very adamant about sending the right signals to businesses that we are going to continue to invest in these technologies, regardless of whatever anybody says in Washington, D.C. This is what we are doubling down on. We are going to double down on zero to near zero equipment. We're going to double down on clean port equipment. We're going to continue to ensure that we promote our EV technology and charging stations throughout the state so that we continue to mobilize and revolutionize how we move in California. And really ensuring that mobility and the ability to be able to move around LA becomes more of a lifestyle change. And we get that done through building not only the infrastructure, but sending those right market signals for those companies to continue to invest in those technologies. And I'm very proud, lastly, to say that for the first time ever now, we in the legislature have engaged the agricultural community to focus on methane reduction. And we know how tremendous that is. I just was in Ireland as well, and it's 40% of their emissions, but they won't even tackle this issue because they're so scared to meet with the ag industry because they have such a stranglehold in the legislature. I'm proud to say that through our short-lived climate pollutant bill, we are asking them to reduce methane by 40% by 2030, and they're engaging with us. It wasn't easy, but they're engaging with us now, again, using the resources we have with the right carrot and stick approach to bring them to the table, and working with the utilities to actually use the energy that can be generated from those dairies and from those farms. And so we, again, California is at the cutting edge of these technologies, and we are not going back. We are not going back. We are going to continue to push. We're going to continue to ensure that everyone in this great state of ours has the opportunity to live healthy lives and breathe clean air. And by God, if I die trying, we're going to continue to push that forward from here until we get this done. It is my pledge to you all. It is our pledge as legislators that we're going to fight the good fight regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for your time.
It is really my pleasure and honor to introduce my friend, Fran Pavley. I've known her for a long time. She ran, in her very first office, I signed up because I met her, found her to be an absolutely can-do person, and I've been there in every campaign ever since, and I wish there were more, and hopefully there may be. But she's one of those people who you can really count on to do the right things for the right reasons. And that's why she's so important and why she has accomplished so much in everything that she's done. She started out her professional career as a middle school teacher. And as I've heard her say many times, if you can be a middle school teacher and do it successfully, you can do almost anything. Right? So she then ran for a seat on the Agoura Hills City Council, and she served on the council for 15 years and was their very first mayor. So that was a wonderful start of her career. She also served on the Coastal Commission and lots of other things on her journey to elected office on the state level. And she served as an assembly person and as a state senator. And over the 14 years, she has accomplished as much as we could ever ask anybody to accomplish. She has authored in 2006 AB 32 that required the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020. She also, in her very first time in office in 2002, she authored AB 1493, which required a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from vehicle taillights. And what was interesting is that in 2010, President Barack Obama implemented the National Clean Car Standards, which was modeled after 1493, which is now known as the Pavley Law. So during a ceremony at the White House Rose Garden, the president personally thanked Senator Pavley for her work on creating clean, safe, secure energy future for California and for the United States. So that law, which is firmly in place in California, has served as a model for a number of states and also for the country. And as we move forward, that law is really going to be there to protect all of us. As regulations on the federal level are being cut back, we're moving forward. So we have Fran Pavley to really thank for that, and we're very grateful. Senator Pavley now is serving as a consultant, and she's doing her work on environmental issues, including air and water quality issues, clean energy, cleaner cars, and climate change. Next year, she is going to be a part-time professor at USC on these issues, and I think that we should all take her classes. I think just to be in her presence and to hear how we can be hopeful and optimistic and to do the right things for the right reasons would do a lot for all of us and to keep our spirits high and going. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to Fran Pavley and welcome her.
So we eliminated the stairs and we created a ramp, but the ramp only has room for one side. So.
Okay. That's good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marlene Grossman, and thank you for your work as president of the board here. Marlene is an amazing person. I have known her about 17 years now. And when she's involved in a project, she gives 100%, doesn't need to do this, but she believes passionately in making this world a better place. And thank you very much for the kind introduction. And only she would be someone who would spend hours and hours on my behalf on those horrible phone banks you have to do when you're supporting people for office. And I remember you giving up your valuable time. And thank you, Denny Zane. I got to know him about 17 years ago when I started to run for office. And if you're running for office and includes Santa Monica, Denny Zane's always someone you want to meet with. And if you represent Santa Monica, you can never be bold enough no matter what I did, you can do more. You keep going. And they always had my back. And I think Denny, being the executive director for Move LA, is a perfect fit for him because he thinks of the big picture and he brainstorms, you know him, all the time on what we could be doing and how we get there. And he's very thoughtful. And when I think of Denny Zane, if you've been to 3rd Street Promenade before we even talked about mixed-use development or pedestrian-oriented retail, he was the person who designed that project way before that style was even popular. This is when we were building indoor malls. He was out there doing this, and that makes sense, especially with the climate in Santa Monica. So, Denny, the reason I'm here is because I talked to him about an issue about 2 months ago, and I asked for some insight and some help on it, and he said, well, since you're here, why don't you come on down to LA and speak at the Move LA conference. So once you ask Denny Zane for a favor, you end up somehow in the Move LA list. Ricardo left, but he was my seatmate in the state Senate, and it's been such a thrill for me to watch over the last 14 years I was in office. All demographic groups in California getting behind clean energy, clean air, and clean water laws, water policies and laws as a fundamental right for all Californians, and as Ricardo always reminds me, regardless of zip code. And so he is definitely carrying the torch, as well as my successor, Henry Stern, in this regard. So as a former middle school history teacher, I thought I'd give you a brief background on some of California's policies and then move quickly into what's next for LA County and how some of these things that I worked on might fit in. So this is 2002, Griffith Park, right? I grew up in Sherman Oaks. Air quality in the 50s and 60s was absolutely horrible. You couldn't go out for recess probably 30 days a year because the smog was so bad you could cut it with a knife. This was before unleaded gas and catalytic converters. So Bill I'd authored my first 2 years in office was to reduce tailpipe emissions of automobiles of greenhouse gases. It was the first greenhouse gas climate change bill in the country. I had no idea that all the automobile manufacturers, car dealers, oil companies, and the list goes on, were going to make this their #1 project to kill this bill. I got a real lesson on how a bill becomes law. What makes California unique, though, did you know that California can pass more stringent air pollution standards than the federal government? Because our state predates the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act that passed in 1970. We were working on smog issues in the 60s, 50s and 60s. As I said, like when I was growing up, we needed to. It was a health hazard, health risk for many Californians. So we have inside the Federal Clean Air Act, that's been policy since 1970, that carve out for California. You can pass more stringent tailpipe emission standards or automobile standards to reduce air pollution, providing you get what's called a waiver from the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. Other states have two choices: adopt California's standards, the stricter standards for reducing emissions, or stay with the federal standards. 14 states have adopted California's clean car standards. Then there was even a Supreme Court decision, Massachusetts versus the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA at the time, in the Bush administration, was saying the EPA had no authority to regulate climate change pollution like greenhouse gas emissions. It wasn't considered like a criteria air pollutant in the Federal Clean Air Act that was passed in 1970. By a narrow 5-4 vote, this tells you Supreme Court justices matter, 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court said, yes, climate change pollution is a form of air pollution. It affects climate and weather. Therefore, EPA, you can regulate greenhouse gases. That decision became very, very important back in Washington, D.C. And then in the Bush administration, the last month in office, they for the first time, denied California's waiver. They had approved it 40 times. Other areas like HOV lanes or catalytic converters, and the list goes on and on. But this one they denied for purely political reasons. We had met all the tests. So let's go on to the next slide, Eli. So fast forward, it's 2009 now. Bush administration had denied the waiver. Obama comes into office. I get a call, it's May of 2009, that President Obama is going to be announcing compromise with the automobile manufacturers who had sued in 5 states to stop California's tailpipe emission law, that they would work together with the Department of Transportation on the federal level, NHTSA, to incorporate fuel efficiency standards. That's miles per gallon standards. States can't regulate fuel efficiency. We can regulate emissions from tailpipes. But working together, the MOU was signed, and I'm in the front row of the Rose Garden at the White House for that picture. I was taking pictures from the front row. So this is, as a former history teacher who taught the Constitution and how bill becomes law, it was really quite amazing. I called my mom on my cell phone. Mom, guess where I am? So I was sitting by Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I knew everyone else in the front row, not had met them before, but knew who they were, and I was the only one that was the outsider. But surrounding President Obama were all the major CEOs of all the foreign and domestic automobile manufacturers on the planet, all agreeing to this compromise measure of implementing California's clean car standards along with the CAFE standards that their Department of Transportation could do. You can see the targets, 2016, 2025, that's the fleet average. So by 2016, they pretty much met their targets, and they're up now and moving forward. Let's say you own Ford Motor Company, you're the CEO. Fleet average means you take all the vehicles you're selling, your SUVs, your pickup trucks, your EVs, and your regular passenger vehicles, and the average fuel efficiency, miles per gallon, needs to be 35 miles per gallon. So for every bigger gas guzzler type vehicle, they're going to be selling a wider choice of more fuel-efficient cars. That's why you're seeing so much diversity in the marketplace for consumers to pick from. The different cars you can buy today is far different than it was just 15 years ago, and this is all happening in your lifetime. So here's the bad news. The Trump administration, Pruitt and people, and the automobile manufacturers and their supporters, legislators in both the House and the Senate, are trying to delay and roll back those targets for 2025. They want to revisit them. Now, what does delay mean? Delay means, let's say you put that off for several years, and that they will pause in the amount of innovation and new technologies they will be doing in these newer, cleaner cars. Delay means to the public, then you're going to pay more at the pump for gasoline if you don't have a more fuel-efficient car. You will have dirtier air, and you will also emit more greenhouse gas emissions. We can't let that happen, so keep your eye on what's going on in DC, because a lot of these air quality issues are directly relevant to California and quality of life issues. Eli, next one. So moving forward, buried in the fog in San Francisco was the signing of the Global Warming Solutions Act. That's AB 32, signed by Governor Schwarzenegger. You can see a surrounding cast of characters here, including Speaker Nunez, who was a co-author with me, the governor of New York, the mayor of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom at the time. This was the first multi-sector approach. What this did is put a cap on emissions and rolled them back to 2020 levels, by 2020. what was significant about this is it gave a market signal by putting a cap on emissions to investors and innovators. They needed to know that there would be a market for these new technologies, that they would make the investment. 60% of all the venture capitalists' investment in clean tech comes to California out of the whole nation because of policies like this. When you have a mandatory target to reach, people amazingly reach out and come up with great ideas, not only in vehicles, but lower carbon fuels, renewable energy, appliance and building standards, and land use planning. That means transit-oriented corridors. All good policies that improve air quality, help with all your priorities on goods movement, reducing pollution, and reaching our climate targets at the same time. Next slide. So this is no surprise to you. The number one contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in California is the transportation sector, cars and trucks. That's why there's such a focus on this. Next slide. So last year, and this is in Los Angeles, we extended AB 32. That went to 2020, and AB 32, we've reached the targets. We're at the reduction targets that need to be achieved by 2020. So it was really important we extended AB 32 10 more years, and I picked the same number because that made it easier for me. So SB 32 moved that forward to 2030. This was co-joined with my good friend Eduardo Garcia, who is standing on the other side of Governor Brown, signing his bill that really focused on important fundamental principle. And it was co-joined together. That means if one bill didn't pass, both bills wouldn't pass. So we worked together as a team, along with Speaker Rendon, to institute a policy of equity. And he's a young man from Imperial Valley area, and who's passionate about that these policies will benefit everyone's neighborhoods. Next slide. So we're going in the right direction. More needs to be done, and this is where Move LA becomes an important piece of this puzzle to get these targeted reductions. We're moving ahead with or without the national government. We've been waiting on the national government for years, and I myself am working passionately with the Schwarzenegger Institute on a subnational level. That means with other states on these kinds of policies. Next slide. Is there a next slide? Okay, so let me go on with some of the good news that I wanted to focus on to get you prepared for your What's Next LA. Of course, page 5 in your program, if you haven't seen what came out of your amazing victory on measures R and M, you can see the targeted policies. And it looks like they're achievable. Voters really appreciate and actually demand that when you say and campaign to say what you're going to do, that you deliver that, but you can do more. So one of the things the state is doing that may be of help to you, this year they passed the extension of cap and trade. Cap and trade, remember AB 32 and SB 32, puts a cap on emissions and rolls them back. People can either do direct emission reduction from the 350 major emitters in the state, or if they can't make those reductions, they have to pay a fee. And that money that they pay, you could call it pay to pollute. They've made good attempts to try to make the reductions. Maybe the technologies are there or what aren't there. It's too expensive, or what the challenge is. Or at the state, it's like cement companies. We really don't want them to just get up and move across the border to Nevada, so you have to accommodate some things. Anyway, they would pay to keep their business going in California. So cap and trade monies. Just to California alone on air quality, $900 million was appropriated by the legislature this year. It's discretionary one-year money, but I see some programs that would benefit this area, Carl Moyer, clean vehicle rebate programs, freight hubs, a lot on goods movement, enhanced fleet modernization, clean buses and clean trucks, around $900 million, a tremendous victory. The second one, have you been following the $800 million settlement from Volkswagen? California gets $800 million of the $1.2 billion settlement. A lot of money will be available on EV infrastructure, access to zero-emission vehicles, rideshare, things like that. And there's an amazing program called Green City Initiative, headed by Electrify America. I know they're doing a pilot program in Sacramento right now. This certainly fits in with your vision. So my challenge to all of you, as we look past and you're looking to the future, and I'm a native Angelino, is think more broadly. I had to think on a statewide level, but I know LA County's 12 million people. Air problems and greenhouse gas problems and traffic gridlock don't stay within county boundary lines. Have you noticed that? So think broader, Riverside County, or look at your local air district. How can multiple counties achieve these policies and greater reductions by working together? So on goods movement, that obviously is something from the ports and the 710 and down the 210 freeway. It affects multiple counties. What is your vision for working together collaboratively with other counties? I know fellow legislators from Riverside, they are passionate about doing something about air quality and goods movement. Perhaps work with them. Congestion relief, everyone puts down traffic as probably the #1 problem with our quality of life issues affecting our region. It affects our economy, it affects our air, it affects greenhouse gas emissions. That regional cooperation is incredibly important. Your challenge will be, and I'd be glad to help brainstorm with you later on, is how do you pay for some of these improvements that you need? Can you look at an expansion of a Carl Moyer kind of program? Is there some kind of shared umbrella organization that could pull all these different cities and counties together in moving forward? So maybe instead of Move LA, it's a broader context than that. And together, I think you guys could become a true model, not only for California, but frankly, the rest of the world, a major city with an urbanized community looking at smart growth strategies, cleaner trucks, getting people out of their cars, more transportation options. And with that, it'll be a better future, not only for the economy, but also the environment. Thank you very much.